Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with education, to do with health, tourism, mining, devolution, and many other aspects of life. We bring them here and see how they impact on our economy. My name is John Masugu. Every year, thousands of graduates are kept at our various universities, which number about 20 at the moment. And what comes after that is search for jobs. Those who have done humanities, those who have done the STEM subjects, equally cry foul and say, we've spent time at universities and we don't seem to be getting jobs. Is there anything wrong with our education system? What is it that needs to be adjusted so that it is relevant and it creates jobs that we need for our growing economy? We've got Professor Mandivamba Rukuni. Professor, you're in charge of ZIMCHE, which is the Zimbabwe Council for Higher Education, and you run the policy for these institutions. We've invited you to talk about relevance and quality of our universities. Welcome.
I'm delighted to be back on the program, and as I say, I'm chairman of ZIMCHE Council. I don't run the organization. We do have a chief executive officer, Professor Jimbo. I think you've also heard him.
Yes, we've had Professor Jimbo here to
sure.
talk about what ZIMCHE does.
Right.
But we are going to be talking about some of your thoughts,
Okay.
which you have shared about relevance of our universities as well as the quality. What exactly are the concerns at the moment that you have, and you met different vice chancellors to discuss some of these issues? It would be nice to hear that, because you are actually building the human resources of the future and the present.
Sure. So last week when we were at Midland State University, a meeting with the different chairpersons of the various university councils. You know, each university has its own council. And the vice chancellors were also part of that meeting. So the most important thing we were talking about in that meeting was the quality assurance system, just ensuring that ZIMCHE does work closely with the universities in actually implementing the quality assurance system. So it was that gave me the opportunity to talk about relevance, brainstorm a bit, let them know some of the thoughts in council. Some of them are not yet policy, some are now policy, but eventually when they become policy, then our management definitely implement our thoughts. Yes, thanks.
While you are doing that, Professor, already out there, society also validates the university and the quality of education that comes from there. Some will say they are useless degrees that are being offered by universities. Others will say, no, that university offers lower learning than other universities and so forth. How do you then respond to society's concerns when it is now as public as that? And you also touch on the honorary degrees.
Yes. So the major contradiction that we have with Zimbabwe is not only does Zimbabwe have the highest literacy rate on the continent, on the African continent, but also even our graduates here, when they graduate and leave and go overseas somewhere, they are performing in the top 5 to 10%, which means our education is top class, but not for Zimbabwe, but for somewhere else. So heritage-based education 5.0 was the policy to adjust that. How do we make the education more relevant to Zimbabwe? How do we inculcate the deep critical thinking skills, not only in our students, but even in our staff, to design curriculum that is more relevant for our situation in Zimbabwe? So those are the issues we were discussing, yes.
How did that come about, Professor? Because at first it was the humanities. People would say, no, if you study humanities, there are no longer any jobs. But it has also gone to some of the STEM subjects. And obviously you want to help us understand what would have happened along the way to be where we are.
Yeah, because any society that's industrializing, industrialization as a process is actually a social process. That's another misconception that we have in our education system, to think that industrialization is STEM. Absolutely not. Industrialization is the transformation of society at every level. This is the way society reorganizes itself to increase production, more efficiency in production, diversify products that are available. So the change in which we organize ourselves is the industrialization. Manufacturing is the STEM process. So manufacturing is just part of this whole thing. So our education is trying to change. We're in a process of trying to transform it. So what may look like a dysfunctional system is actually a transformational process. And you see that where we are still missing is we don't have enough of those lecturers who are really grounded in heritage-based education 5.0, who have been able to inculcate where we've come from with our civilization all across the board, medicine, engineering, all these things we were doing before we were colonized. Our history did not start with colonization. We were top class civil engineers before we even colonized. Look what we built in Great Zimbabwe. You can cut across all disciplines. That is what we are failing to inject back in our system.
So just to wind off this segment, you are saying there's some way where these humanities subjects and the STEM subjects meet within the heritage-based foundation?
Well, they are inseparable. It's just that because we still have colonized minds, we are made to think that economic capital is the most important form of capital. Or it is not. Even social capital is more important than economic capital. But environmental capital is the most important wealth. So the environment is the real wealth, which informs how even our social systems are built. We built your family systems, the way we build our houses, the way we farm and feed ourselves, where we fetch our water, is all determined by our relationship with the environment. With those strong social systems, now strong families, strong communities, is what creates now opportunities for new economic capital. So it might look like running around doing manufacturing here and there and so on is more important. The most important is the 3R1. These are all embedded in the environment. And if we don't remember that, in fact, we have forgotten that. So that's why we are busy rushing for economic activities which destroy the environment, sometimes even destroy the family system and the community system. Well, we'll pay badly in the long run. So heritage-based education 5.0 is trying to say, please, we want to modernize and accelerate economic transformation, but you have to take the whole lot. Environmental, social, and our economic wealth is all one thing.
Well, I'll stop you there, Professor. Very interesting the way you are explaining STEM and other disciplines in order to build a strong society. That's Professor Mandivamba Rukuni, is the chairperson of ZIMCHE. So join us in the second segment of Economic Forum. Well, we've just learned from Professor Mandivamba Rukuni, who is our guest today and who is also the chairperson of ZIMCHE, that we should really take our heritage-based education system quite seriously. That's the point, Professor. And when you are assessing the quality of our education in universities, that's what you look at. Just tell us about how you do that. I know, especially at policy level, what is the policy? Because yes, management told us about the processes, but at policy level, what is it that you want to adjust?
So at policy level, we're saying historically the quality of the education was measured around teaching, research, and what community service. The new policy says heritage-based education 5.0. So we add innovation and industrialization. So you find that historically the main method of quality assurance is through peer review So we have set the standards. We have 17 standards. And then we do have academics.
Maybe just a few of them so that we understand what these standards are. Just maybe mention 3 or 4 of them. What are these standards?
These standards, they cut across, say, 5 or 6 areas, starting with the governance of the university and the leadership systems in the university that guarantee accountability. A second area would be the actual curriculum itself, the quality of the curriculum, for teaching, research, and so on. The third area would be, if you look at the student support services, is the university capable of really supporting these students? Everything from their accommodation, the teaching facilities, the library systems, the access to computers, internet, and of course, the quality of the teaching staff and all that. Then there will be the usual issues of, does the university have enough resources to run its programs? Most of our universities, the public ones, get a big grant from the government. It can only go so far, then they have to also raise additional resources to cover up for the gaps. So these are the broad areas. So under each one of those broad areas, I've painted will be maybe 5, 6 broken down into segments. So that's what adds up to 17. But you could categorize them into 5 or 6. Yeah.
How then, at policy level, would you be influenced by a situation whereby you are approached by graduates from the humanities as well as from the STEM subjects who are saying, we have completed our education, went through innovation and everything, but we're jobless?
Yeah.
How does policy address that?
So the
holistically,
it's the most important issue facing not just the education system, but the entire economy as a whole. So within the education system, there are several aspects there which are important for quality. The first, not necessarily the most important, but if we look at the first I'd like to put on the table, is the relevance of the curriculum. Okay. So in the past, it was simply as long as you had the best textbooks from the world, but with heritage-based education 5.0, the issue is, do we have scholars who deeply understand our heritage in each of their fields? If you're in pharmacology, where did we come from with our own drugs and medicines that we used traditionally? If you're in engineering, how did we used to build before we were colonized? What materials did we use? What engineering principles? If you take every discipline and bring in that heritage part, that's the past. Then you say present, how we take global knowledge from all over the world. We want the best knowledge from everywhere in the world. Convert it and translate it to local needs. So the quality of our professors and lecturers has to be so high that the practical understanding of their subject, they can translate foreign knowledge into local knowledge. And then inculcate the critical thinking skills that students need to live in a world where we know on this continent, including Zimbabwe especially, there are no formal jobs. We are not industrialized nations yet. So it's false to admit students in a university. I've even said to our vice chancellors, tell your new students on day 1, we are admitting you in the thousands here, but there are no jobs out there. Don't pretend after 3 years you did not know there are no jobs. So when you are admitted in the university, the idea is not to get a job in industry because there are no jobs, but to be able to survive under any situation, to be able to innovate, to be able to be creative. Okay, that is where we come from as Africans. We did not start getting busy when the colonizers created a few factories for us. We need to bring up our children to be effective, to solve problems. These critical thinking skills that are missing in our curriculum are to do with how do you assess any situation and survive out of it and get going. You don't sit back and say, I'm unemployed.
Well, Professor, I will stop you there. That's Professor Mandivamba Rukuni, who is the chairperson of ZIMCHE, the Zimbabwe Council for Higher Education. And we're talking about policy reviews with regards to universities so that there is an improvement in terms of relevance and the quality of what comes out of universities. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. Well, today we're talking about the relevance and quality of our university education. Does it have impact in our society? We are rebuilding our society, we are industrializing, we're looking at Vision 2030, going through NDS 1 and NDS 2. Are you with us at the universities in those endeavors that have been set by government?
The universities, in fact, all higher tertiary education institutions definitely have to buy into NDS2 and contribute as a sector. So they're doing a number of very, I think, advanced things to try and get universities, polytechs, industrial training centers, and so on to be more relevant. For instance, the ministry has just passed a policy to say every institution has to adopt a community. It could be a physical community, industrial community, whatever. Work more closely with the communities and society at large. So that's coming through. So in the case of council, what we are seeing is not so much that we are going to be like hound dogs, just to flush out a lot of the existing degrees and so on, but rather to spend more time prioritizing degrees that meet what we believe are the correct requirements for approval. For instance, we are pushing towards policies which will say we will only approve the degree that you are proposing as a university if we have evidence that you do have the staff with the requisite skills to teach practical things, to teach the critical thinking capacities in that discipline, to be able to inculcate the competencies and skills needed in that area. And more importantly, use modules or textbooks that are locally developed, okay? Not to continue to use foreign textbooks. Because why should somebody be promoted from a lecturer to a senior lecturer using a foreign textbook? If you're a proper lecturer, you should have read all the foreign textbooks, gathered all that knowledge, bring in the local material, cobble them up together into a coherent set of knowledge which says, in this discipline, this is what's relevant for us, this is our heritage, this is our past, this is the present, how we apply this knowledge practically to our situation, and this is the future. So we are going to be much more difficult to impress in terms of all these new degrees that are being pushed through Zimcha.
If you throw a stone among Zimbabweans, it will invariably land on a doctor. Now talk about doctorates that are being dished out.
So on the doctorates, you see, we have got two types of doctorates. There's the taught one in class, and then the honorary doctorates. And you're quite right. You know, it's not just a Zimbabwean problem. It's a worldwide problem. People just want titles. You know, everyone wants to be a professor, engineer, doctor, pastor, prophetess,
apostle.
Apostle. Mm-hmm. So when you get the titles, you can use it for other things. So we have to be careful as academic institutions that we don't abuse these titles. That's why I was also saying, even professor should be a real professor. So doctor, if you are to simplify the issue of the trained doctors, a trained PhD should be an open process. It should not be a privatized process. Starting from proposal development, when somebody submits a proposal in the university, it should be open process. Maybe even assigned a supervisor, but even within the department, a student should always have opportunity for public presentation so that you get comments, not just from your department, other departments. Eventually, as your proposal gets developed, even peers in the industry should be coming to these sessions so that it's clear this is a student whose proposal is being reviewed. By the time you get registered in your PhD program and the supervisor is supporting you, you're still in the public eye, you're still presenting your material And it's very clear that people who go through this more open process will be legitimate PhD products. But when you privatize it too much, you are just allocated a supervisor, and one day we just find you're a doctor, then that's suspect. So I'm saying to universities, make the PhD training process an open process.
The honorary ones.
So the honorary ones, no, that when a university confers an honorary degree to somebody, it's really just to acknowledge the work they've done, which some instances is more academic, sometimes it's just contributions to society. The real law says you cannot use that title elsewhere except in that particular university. When you're in the confines of that university, okay, you can't use the title outside the campus. You can't put it on your CV or your business card. That's the convention. But of course, there will be exceptions here and there. But once again, the important thing is that we are now tightening very hard. And in fact, as you know, we've closed down a few institutions who have been giving these fake honorary degrees. But yeah, we want doctors and professors. Somebody to be a professor should be an authority in their subject. How do we know you're an authority? It's not the number of publications. You can publish 30, 40 articles. So what? Doesn't make you an authority. What makes you an authority is now that your work is felt in those 5 areas. When you teach, you're able to bring knowledge to practical reality. When you go into research, you're able to work on local relevance. You're only not able to do research in one area. We want to see research across the board. Fundamental basic research, we want to see applied research, we want to see problem solving research, subject matter research when you're out in the communities. So the community service, why take the title of professor if you are in a university in Chinoyo or Masingo or Beru and the local community doesn't even know your work? Before you're promoted to associate professor, let your work be felt in the community. That's what community service is. No one should be promoted to associate professor until they demonstrate that they're able to work in an environment and get products out there accepted in the industries. Industrialization does not only apply to technical products, it applies to any ideas, especially social ones. So industrialization, as I say, is a social process. Any idea that helps, that solves problems in a society, massifying it is industrialization.
Well, Professor, I would like to thank you. That's Professor Mandivamba Rukuni, Chairperson of the Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education. We've been talking about his thoughts, really, on how the education system at universities can be transformed so that it remains relevant to Zimbabwe. If you have any questions that you want to ask about this particular program and many others that we broadcast, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you'd like to engage with our guests like Professor Rukuni here, you can do that and we can link on our social media platforms. If you happen to have missed some of the programs, you can watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Professor Mandivamba Rukuni and the production crew of Economic Forum, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.